So Adina Moshe, who was kidnapped from kibbutz near Oz, and she was held captive in Gaza for 50 days, and was released in that first release of hostages back in December, late November. And she spoke today about a fellow captive from her kibbutz. His name was Chaim Perry. She was with him in captivity. They were together in captivity, and he was found last month. It was found out last night that he was killed in captivity. And she was heartbroken, and she spoke about a conversation they had about their release and about their time together. And when she was eventually released, before that they were having conversations in captivity, and he was very pessimistic. He said that they would be captive at least for 2 years. And he sensed, this was in the newspaper today, that he sensed that because Bibi is prime minister, then he won't place hostages as top priority. And sadly, this made the news because they just found out that he died in captivity. And meanwhile, 2 days ago, 5 bodies of kidnapped Israelis were freed from Gaza. Time is running out. Time is running out for the 115 hostages that are still there. And I'm hoping, a lot of them are still alive. But so I watched Bibi's speech in Congress with a lot of anticipation this week. And I'm definitely feeling a lot of split personality disorder coming on again when I watch Bibi's speech. Because on the one hand, as an Israeli myself, as someone who lived there until 2 years ago, so I can't be fooled by Bibi anymore. So I know what he's up to. I see him working his base. I see his great English, much better than mine even. And he's a great politician. And meanwhile, Israel's still at war, and soldiers are dying, bodies are being found, men and women, babies, they're just there, and for 9 months in Gaza. And, so when I watch him, it doesn't, I look and I just don't believe the things that he's saying. And then on the other hand, as a Jewish American liberal, and it's in that order, and you can place Israeli somewhere if you want. So I watch a literal split screen of just terrible things that are going on outside of Congress. Anti-Semitism, stupidity, violence, signs that justify resistance, and that, just awful things, the things that they're doing to the buildings. And while Netanyahu is inside Congress saying what we need to hear right now. When I listen to him, I say, oh, I actually need to hear these things. So, it's pretty lonely being a liberal Jew these days, and I think that a lot of people feel that. Because when I watch the RNC and I see how someone is saying, let me hear you cheer if you support Israel, and everybody's cheering, and then he says, if you're in the Democratic convention, you'd be booed off stage. It's a pretty lonely feeling. It's a pretty lonely feeling for me. But luckily, very luckily, my mother, who is here, she raised me well. And I can't be fooled by that either. Because, it's not really about the amount of cheer for me. It's not about, oh, let me say something and everybody's going to cheer. It's about what's right. And it's about following the right leaders. And the ones who really care about their country. And our Parshat Pinchas, it has a lot about leadership. It's really a masterclass in leadership. And as Moshe confronts his mortality toward the end of the Parsha, and he asks God to appoint a successor. So he says, so he says to Hashem, he says, "Yifkod Adonai Elohei haruchot lechol basar ish al ha'eda, asher יצא לפניהם ואשר יבוא לפניהם, ואשר יוציאם ואשר יביאם, ולא תהיה עדת אדוני כצאן, אשר אין להם רועה." So he says, may the God of the spirits of all flesh choose a person over the congregation, who will go out before them and come in before them, and who will lead them out and bring them in, so that the congregation of God will not be like sheep without a shepherd. So these great leaders, like this great leader, Moshe, who, he's flawed, and, we a lot of times see his humanity. We see also what a great leader he can be and how he cares about what comes after him. So all Moshe cares about at this moment, or at least he gives voice to, it's his people going forward the best way possible. And he's heartbroken at the thought that they might be like a flock without a shepherd. When I read this, I'm heartbroken for Moshe, but I'm also really inspired. I'm really inspired by him. And instead of taking care of his ego, of his own position, of his own destiny, he speaks on behalf of his people, and he's willing to let go of his own position, and that's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible to think about these days. People like willing to just let go, and Moshe is able to accept his own limitations, vulnerabilities, and also he's able to advocate for his people. So he did the opposite of advocating for himself, his position in history, his own continued leadership, and he says words that I really love. He says, "Vayismoch et yadav alav veyatzaveu kasher diber Adonai beyad Moshe." That's how the parsha ends. The translation says he laid his hands upon him and commissioned him, as Adonai had spoken through Moses. Vayismoch et yadav alav. So if that translation, that he laid his hands, it's not the exact translation, because when we read, it could be one of the translations, but the word vayismoch is also, it comes from the word samach, which is to trust. And it says, he trusts. He's going to place his hands maybe on who he trusts. I want to quote someone from the New York Times article by Frank Bruni. He writes, "And that's just, however grudging, Biden's withdrawal is a remarkable reckoning and a historical anomaly. It runs counter to human nature, or at least to the nature of humans who have known the exhilaration of being on top. Rulers cling to their gilded stations when they're threatened. They cling tighter. History is loosely with guests who wouldn't leave. Not once they've experienced the fulfillment of the pillows and the fawning of the help." So how can I stop this split screen of loneliness? I ask myself. So first of all, I want to take example of leaders who care about their people, who show us there's a time and place for everything. There's a time to criticize. There's a time to concede. There's a time to admit that there are things that we just are powerless to. And that's how maybe we can let God in our lives. And God can help me let go, say that two things can be okay at the same time also. I can want Bibi to not be prime minister anymore, and I can still say that his speech was what we needed. I can live with the fact that there's anti-Semites on every side of the aisle. One side can be very cunning. The other side can hold tiki torches. So populist applause, it's not going to lead us anywhere. And if I love my country, if I love my countries, okay, then it's okay to want better for them. And Moses lived until 120, and we still have to wait another full book for him to eventually leave. Moses lived until 120. Today happens to be Herzl's 120th anniversary of his death. And Herzl dreamt of a better place, better world, better future. And I want to sort of end with a quote. I won't tell you who the quote is from yet. So this person was asked, "How long would you like to be prime minister?" He said, 3 years, 8 years, 12 years, until the end of time. This is something from the 90s. He said, "My answer is etched in stone," he replies. "I was one of those who pushed for direct elections, and I asked to add a clause that the prime minister wouldn't be able to serve for more than 2 terms. Do what you need to do and retire," he added. What you won't do in your first term, you might do in your second term. But you don't need anything more than that. I'll be happy to go to do other things." You know who said that? It was Benjamin Netanyahu in 1997. And Netanyahu, he's now in office for more than 17 years, collectively. Longest serving prime minister in Israel. And, I just, something that I learned from these leaders is, you got to know when it's time to go. And you got to know when it's time to end your Dvar and to go to the Baruch Hu. So, Shabbat Shalom, everybody.